My parents banned me from the family party. Not quietly. Not privately. In the middle of the ballroom at the Waldorf in Manhattan, with crystal chandeliers glowing above us and a string quartet playing something soft and elegant, my mother leaned in and said, "You're not welcome here, Emily. This isn't your place tonight." People were laughing around us. Champagne glasses clinked. My sister Olivia stood a few feet away, smiling beside her wealthy boyfriend like she had already won something. I felt every eye on me. "This event is important," my father added under his breath. "Don't make it awkward." I looked at my reflection in the polished marble floor, simple black dress. No designer label, no diamond bracelet. "I understand," I said, and I walked out. I didn't argue. I didn't beg to stay. 3 days later, they were pounding on my apartment door in panic, because they had just learned something. I control my billionaire grandfather's $270 million inheritance. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming. But the truth is, I did. My parents had been curating their guest list for weeks. Every name that made it onto that embossed ivory invitation had status attached to it. Venture capitalists, political donors, board members, people whose last names opened doors. And then there was me, Emily Carter, 32, director of a nonprofit that funds public school literacy programs. No hedge fund, no tech startup, no impressive fiancé, just impact. Apparently, impact doesn't photograph well. The ballroom at the Waldorf shimmered with gold light. A massive floral installation framed the stage where my parents would renew their vows. My sister Olivia floated through the room in a silver gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Daniel Brooks, her soon-to-be fiancé if tonight went according to plan, stood beside her, shaking hands with men who managed 9-figure portfolios. I was halfway to the bar when my mother intercepted me. "Emily," she said tightly, fingers curling around my wrist. Her smile remained perfectly frozen for anyone watching. "Can we talk?" We stepped aside, near a mirrored column. "This isn't appropriate," she said, lowering her voice. "Daniel's family is here. Investors are here. We're presenting a certain image tonight." "I am your daughter," I replied. "Yes," she said quickly. "But you don't fit the narrative." The narrative. That word landed harder than I expected. My father joined us moments later. "Sweetheart, it's not personal," he said in the same tone he used when negotiating contracts. "It's optics." "Optics," I repeated. Olivia appeared then, gliding toward us with a glass of champagne. "Mom, Dad, Daniel's parents are asking about the foundation strategy for next quarter." Her eyes flicked to me. "Oh," she added lightly. "I didn't know you were actually coming." Actually coming. I had received an invitation, but suddenly, I understood it hadn't been meant for me. My mother exhaled slowly. "Emily, this event is crucial. Daniel's father is considering a joint venture with your father's firm. We can't afford distractions." "I'm a distraction?" "No," my father said quickly. "You're just unconventional." Unconventional meant I didn't measure my worth in equity shares. It meant I drove a 5-year-old car instead of leasing something imported. It meant I spent my weekends in classrooms instead of country clubs. Olivia tilted her head. "It's just one night, Em. Don't make this dramatic." I looked at her, really looked at her. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect performance. "You want me to leave," I said calmly. My mother's jaw tightened. "You're not welcome here. This isn't your place tonight." There it was. Not your place. The quartet kept playing. A server walked past us with a tray of champagne flutes. Laughter erupted from the other side of the room. Life continued, as if nothing had just shifted permanently. I felt something inside me settle, not break. Settle. Like a final piece clicking into place. "I understand," I said. And I meant it. Because in that moment I realized something they didn't. They thought I had nothing to lose. That I was the least powerful person in the room. They didn't know I had spent the last year quietly signing documents with James Whitman, the trustee of my grandfather's estate. They didn't know my name was listed as sole executor and controlling authority over $270 million in diversified assets. They didn't know my grandfather had built legal protections specifically for moments like this. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't remind them who I was. I simply picked up my coat, walked past the photographers at the entrance, and stepped out into the cold Manhattan air. Behind me, the doors closed. And with them, so did something else. 3 days later, when they showed up at my apartment in panic, I would realize something else too. They had finally looked up my name and discovered I owned the narrative. My grandfather used to say, "The loudest people in a room are usually the least powerful." At the time, I thought he was talking about boardrooms. Now I realized he had been talking about my family. Grandpa William Carter never liked parties. He tolerated them, he funded them, but he preferred quiet mornings, strong black coffee, and conversations without an audience. For the last 2 years of his life, I was the one sitting across from him at that long walnut table in his Upper East Side townhouse. Not Olivia, not my parents, me. They were busy, or networking, or traveling. There was always something more urgent than an aging billionaire who no longer hosted galas. I was there when his health started declining. I was there when the press stopped calling. I was there when he said, "Emily, pay attention. The real test of character is how people treat you when they think you can't give them anything." At the time, I thought he was just reflecting. I didn't realize he was preparing me. 2 weeks after his funeral, I received a call from James Whitman. "Miss Carter," he said in that calm, meticulous tone only estate attorneys seem to possess. "Your grandfather left specific instructions that you are to meet with me privately before any public reading of the will." I remember staring at my phone for a long time after that. Privately. When I walked into Whitman and Associates, I assumed I'd be told about a modest inheritance, maybe a property share, maybe voting rights on the family investment firm. Instead, James slid a thick leather folder across his desk. "Your grandfather established an irrevocable trust valued at approximately $270 million, he said evenly. "You are listed as sole executor and controlling authority." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt impossible. "That can't be right," I said. "My father runs the firm. Olivia has been preparing to step in for years." James adjusted his glasses. "Your grandfather did not select based on ambition. He selected based on alignment. Alignment with what? His values. The trust was structured carefully. Diversified assets, real estate, investment holdings, equity stakes, liquid reserves. It was airtight, but the most powerful section wasn't financial. It was moral. Section 7.4. James read it aloud. "Any beneficiary who engages in intentional exclusion of family members or associates based on perceived social, professional, or economic inferiority shall immediately forfeit all claims, privileges, and voting rights." I felt my pulse in my ears. "He anticipated something," I whispered. "He anticipated patterns," James corrected. There was more. The controlling authority me had discretionary power over distributions. No beneficiary could override decisions without my consent. And there was a clause requiring public transparency for major disputes. Grandpa hadn't just left money. He had built a framework, a filter, a mirror. "Why me?" I asked quietly. James didn't hesitate. "Because you never once asked him for anything." I sat in silence for a long time that day. I could have told my parents immediately. I could have walked into that ballroom last week and let everyone know exactly who I was. But Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory. "Never use power to demand respect. Let people reveal themselves first." So I waited. For a year, I signed documents quietly, reviewed quarterly reports, met with board members, learned everything about the portfolio. My family assumed Grandpa's assets had been absorbed into the firm structure. They assumed control stayed with them. They never asked me. Not once. And when my mother said, "This isn't your place," 3 nights ago, something inside me clicked. Because I understood what Grandpa meant. They believed I had nothing to offer. And that belief had just triggered the very clause they didn't know existed. 3 days after the party, when Daniel Brooks ran a routine background due diligence before formalizing his engagement to Olivia, he found my name. Sole executor. Controlling authority. $270 million. He didn't call Olivia. He called my father. And suddenly, I wasn't unconventional anymore. I was essential. That's when the pounding started at my apartment door. That's when panic replaced pride. And that's when my family finally realized they had just excluded the only person who controlled their future. The knocking started at 7:12 a.m. Not polite knocking. Not the kind you give when you're hoping someone answers. It was urgent. uneven, almost desperate. I was still in my kitchen, barefoot, pouring coffee into the chipped blue mug Grandpa had once teased me about. "You manage hundreds of millions now," he had joked once, "and you still drink from that thing?" I liked that mug. It reminded me that money wasn't identity. The knocking came again. "Emily?" My father's voice called through the door. "Open up!" I froze for a moment. They had never been to my apartment before. Not when I moved in. Not when I got promoted. Not when Grandpa passed away. But now they were here. I walked to the door slowly and looked through the peephole. My mother's hair was unstyled. My father wasn't wearing his usual tailored jacket. Olivia stood behind them, sunglasses hiding her face even though the hallway lighting was dim. I opened the door. No one smiled. "What happened?" I asked calmly. My father stepped inside without waiting to be invited. "Why didn't you tell us?" There it was. Not, "How are you?" Not, "We're sorry about the other night." Just accusation. "Tell you what?" I asked. My mother's voice trembled not with emotion but with calculation unraveling. "Daniel had his legal team review the Carter holdings before formalizing the engagement, and—" I leaned against the kitchen counter. "And your name came up," Olivia snapped, pushing her sunglasses onto her head. "Sole executor, controlling authority, $270 million. She said the number like it tasted bitter. I took a sip of coffee. "Yes," I said simply. Silence filled the room. My father stared at me as if I had transformed overnight. "You've been sitting on this for a year?" "Yes." "Why?" my mother demanded. I tilted my head slightly. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" No one answered. Because we all knew the answer. Olivia let out a sharp laugh. "This is ridiculous. You manipulated Grandpa. You were always there, whispering in his ear while the rest of us were working." "Working?" I repeated softly. "You visited him once in the last 18 months. That's not the point." "It is the point." My father ran a hand over his face. I had never seen him look uncertain before. "You need to fix this," he said finally. "Fix what?" "Daniel is reconsidering the engagement," my mother admitted. "His family is concerned about stability." "Stability?" I echoed. Olivia's composure cracked. "He thinks we didn't know about the trust structure. He thinks we're irresponsible." I let that sit in the air. Because it wasn't wrong. "He says any long-term partnership requires transparency," my father continued. "He's pausing investment discussions." There it was. Not heartbreak. Not family unity. Investment discussions. I set my mug down gently. "You told me I didn't belong at the party," I reminded them. "That it wasn't my place." My mother's eyes flashed. "That was different." "How?" "It was about image," she said quickly. "Presentation." "And now?" I asked. Now it was about survival. Olivia stepped closer. "Just sign over joint authority," she said. "Make Dad co-controller. That's all this is about." I almost smiled. "You think this is about control?" I asked. "Isn't it?" she shot back. "No," I said quietly. "It's about character." My father stiffened. "Don't be self-righteous, Emily." "I'm not." I walked to the small desk near my window and pulled out a folder. "Grandpa structured the trust very carefully," I said, opening it. "There's a morality clause. Section 7.4. My mother's face drained of color. "What does that mean?" Olivia demanded. "It means," I continued calmly, "that any intentional exclusion of a family member based on perceived social or professional inferiority voids beneficiary privileges." The silence that followed was different. Heavy. "Void?" my father repeated. "Yes." Olivia shook her head. "That doesn't apply." "That's not what happened." "You told me I wasn't welcome," I said, "because I didn't fit the narrative." "That's not legal language," she argued. "It doesn't have to be." "The clause evaluates behavior, not phrasing." My mother sat down slowly at my kitchen table. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "You wouldn't use that against us." "I haven't used anything," I replied. "I've done nothing but exist." My father looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "When were you planning to tell us?" he asked quietly. "I wasn't," I answered. Olivia's eyes widened. "You were just going to let us find out like this?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because Grandpa had taught me something invaluable." Because power used too early loses its lesson. Because I needed to know who you were when you thought I was powerless. But instead of saying all that, I simply replied, because you already showed me who you are. My father swallowed hard. What do you want? He asked finally. It wasn't a demand anymore. It was a negotiation. I met his eyes. Come to Boston on Friday, I said. There's a board meeting. The trustees will be there. So will Daniel. And? Olivia whispered. And we'll let the documents speak. For the first time since they arrived, no one argued. Because they finally understood something. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It was a legal reality. And I was no longer the daughter who didn't belong. I was the one holding the future. Boston was cold on Friday morning. Not the dramatic kind of cold, just sharp enough to wake you up. The boardroom at Whitman and Associates overlooked the Charles River. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished walnut table, 12 leather chairs arranged with deliberate symmetry. Power has a scent. It smells like quiet control. When I walked in, James Whitman was already seated at the head of the table, files arranged in front of him like chess pieces. My parents arrived together. Olivia came alone. Daniel Brooks entered last. He nodded at me, not warmly, not coldly, just respectfully. That alone shifted the balance in the room. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds. James broke the silence. Thank you for attending. Today's meeting concerns the Carter Trust and recent concerns raised regarding governance stability. He looked at me briefly, as if confirming consent. I gave a small nod. My father cleared his throat. This doesn't need to be adversarial. James responded calmly. That depends entirely on behavior. A screen behind him flickered on. Slide 1. Carter Family Trust, Governance Structure. Slide 2. Sole Executor, Emily Carter. Olivia's jaw tightened. James continued. As outlined in the trust agreement signed and notarized 18 months ago, controlling authority rests solely with Miss Carter. No amendments may be made without her written approval. My mother shifted uncomfortably. This feels unnecessary, she said. We're family. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Transparency is necessary, he said evenly. The room absorbed that. James clicked to the next slide. Section 7.4, Moral Conduct Clause. The language appeared on screen. Any beneficiary engaging in intentional exclusion, humiliation, or reputational damage toward a family member based on perceived social, economic, or professional inferiority shall forfeit all beneficiary privileges, including but not limited to voting rights, distribution eligibility, and advisory influence. Olivia scoffed. That's subjective. It is not, James replied calmly. It is documented. He clicked again. On the screen appeared a screenshot, an email from my mother to extended relatives. We're keeping the guest list selective this year. Emily's nonprofit career doesn't align with the image we're presenting. Another slide. A text message from Olivia to me. Please don't come tonight. It's not your scene. Another. A voicemail transcript from my father. This isn't your place. Let us handle the optics. Silence fell like something physical. My mother stared at the screen as if it had betrayed her. Olivia stood abruptly. You saved those? I didn't need to, I said quietly. The trust requires documentation for review in case of dispute. All communications were archived. You planned this, she accused. No, I answered. You did. Daniel exhaled slowly. This is why due diligence exists, he said, almost to himself. My father looked between us. So, what are you saying? That one misunderstanding triggers forfeiture? James folded his hands. It isn't one misunderstanding. It's a pattern of exclusion based on perceived status disparity. That's interpretation, Olivia insisted. No, Daniel said this time, voice firmer. It's character. The word echoed. Character, James continued. Under trust law, intent and behavior matter. The clause is enforceable. If Miss Carter chooses to activate review, beneficiary privileges may be suspended pending board confirmation. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. Suspended? Yes. And if confirmed? Revoked. The room shifted. This was no longer emotional. It was legal. Olivia turned toward me. You wouldn't ruin your own family. I held her gaze. I didn't ruin anything. My father leaned forward. Emily, think carefully. This affects everyone. It already did, I said. Daniel spoke next. For clarity, I paused engagement discussions because I need alignment in values, not just assets. My firm does not partner with instability. Olivia looked at him as if he'd struck her with a sentence. You're choosing her? She asked. I'm choosing governance integrity, he replied calmly. That hurt her more. James turned to me. Miss Carter, do you wish to initiate formal review under Section 7.4? This was the moment. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a quiet decision that could shift inheritance lines permanently. I looked at my parents. At Olivia. At Daniel. At the documents Grandpa had drafted long before any of this happened. I thought about the ballroom. The phrase, not your place. I thought about how small I had felt walking out those doors. And how steady I felt now. I'm not here for revenge, I said slowly. I'm here for accountability. I turned to James. Yes. Initiate review. My mother inhaled sharply. Olivia whispered, You can't take everything. I'm not taking anything, I said. I'm enforcing what already exists. James nodded once. Then formal review begins immediately. He closed the folder. The sound echoed in the room like a gavel. For the first time in my life, my family understood something they had never considered before. Respect isn't inherited, and power doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the one holding the documents. And I was done pretending I didn't. The air in the boardroom felt thinner after James closed the folder. No one moved. No one reached for water. Even the hum of the city beyond the glass windows seemed distant. Olivia was the first to break. You're enjoying this, she said, her voice shaking. You've been waiting for this moment. I didn't answer immediately. Because if I rushed, it would sound defensive. And this wasn't about defense. It was about exposure. I didn't create this clause, I said finally. Grandpa did. You influenced him, she snapped. You were always there, always playing the devoted granddaughter. I was there because he asked me to be, I replied. You were invited to. That's not fair. No, I agreed softly. It isn't. My mother's composure began to crack. Emily, sweetheart, we were protecting you. The word sweetheart felt foreign in her mouth. Protecting me from what? I asked. From embarrassment. From being judged. Daniel's family is particular. I let that settle. So, you decided I wasn't good enough to stand beside you. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. My father leaned forward, both palms flat on the table. Enough, he said sharply. We made a mistake. Fine, we apologize. His tone carried negotiation, not remorse. Then withdraw the review, he added. We move forward. I studied him carefully. For 32 years, that tone had controlled rooms. Controlled outcomes. Controlled me. But this room wasn't his. I can't, I said. You won't, Olivia corrected bitterly. James spoke evenly. To clarify, once review is initiated under governance protocol, it cannot be withdrawn without full board consent. Transparency requirements apply. Olivia turned toward Daniel like someone reaching for an anchor. Say something, she demanded. This is insane. Daniel's expression was calm, almost clinical. This isn't about money, he said. It's about alignment. You're ending our engagement over this? She whispered. I paused it because I needed clarity, he replied. And clarity is here now. The words landed like a door closing. My mother's eyes widened. Daniel, please. This is a family matter. It became a legal matter when you made it conditional on image, he said gently. My father's face reddened not with rage, but with realization. Emily, he said, voice lower now, stripped of authority. Do you understand what this could cost us? Yes, I said. Investors are already nervous. Yes. Our firm could lose partnerships. Yes. And you're comfortable with that? I held his gaze. I'm comfortable with integrity. Silence. Then, Olivia laughed sharp, brittle. This is about revenge. You've always hated being second. I felt something shift inside me, then not anger. Clarity. You think this is about you? I asked quietly. Her laughter stopped. I didn't walk out of that ballroom plotting anything, I continued. I walked out because you told me I didn't belong. You didn't fit the environment, she shouted. Exactly. The word echoed. Grandpa built his fortune from nothing, I continued. He cleaned his own office floors at 19. He slept in a warehouse during his first startup. And you dismissed me because I work in public education. That's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. James cleared his throat. For the record, if review confirms violation, beneficiary privileges are suspended indefinitely. However, he paused, looking at me. The controlling authority may restructure distribution terms. Olivia's head snapped toward him. Restructure? Yes. I inhaled slowly. This was the moment the room expected punishment. Confiscation. Humiliation. But Grandpa hadn't raised me to destroy. He had raised me to reveal. I'm not here to strip anyone of everything, I said carefully. But I am restructuring. My father's eyes narrowed. In what way? I folded my hands on the table. $200 million will be placed into a newly formed charitable foundation. What? Olivia whispered. $50 million will be allocated toward education equity initiatives nationwide. My mother stared at me. You're giving it away? I'm investing it in impact. And the rest? My father demanded. The remaining assets will remain in trust. Beneficiary distributions will be contingent upon compliance with conduct guidelines. Olivia's face drained of color. So, you're putting us on probation? I'm putting everyone on accountability. Daniel leaned back slowly, something like admiration flickering across his face. You're serious, he said. Yes. You'd rather give away the majority than use it to dominate us. Yes. That answer changed the energy in the room. Because power that doesn't retaliate is unsettling. My mother's voice broke. Why are you doing this? I looked at her. Because you never saw me. Because you reduced me to optics. Because you thought money defined worth. But what I said was simpler. Because I don't want to become what hurt me. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Olivia's shoulders sagged. You're destroying everything, she whispered. No, I said gently. I'm building something you can't manipulate. James closed another folder. Formal review will proceed. However, Miss Carter's restructuring proposal will be added to record. My father leaned back slowly, defeated in a way I had never seen. For the first time in my life, he wasn't negotiating upward. He was reacting downward. Daniel stood. I need time to reassess next steps, he said to Olivia, his voice no longer affectionate, just measured. This isn't about wealth, it's about values. Olivia didn't reply. She just stared at me. And for the first time, I didn't see superiority in her eyes. I saw uncertainty. And maybe, beneath it, something else. The meeting adjourned quietly. No shouting. No dramatic exits. Just the slow unraveling of illusions. As everyone began to leave, my mother paused beside me. We didn't realize, she said softly. That's the problem, I replied. They walked out together. My father slightly ahead. Olivia silent. Daniel separate. James remained. You handled that well, he said. I'm not finished, I answered. He studied me carefully. This is the point where most people escalate. I'm not escalating. What are you doing? I looked out at the river below. I'm redefining what power looks like. Because the truth was, the real climax wasn't stripping them of money. It was forcing them to face themselves. And that is far more uncomfortable than losing millions. The headlines didn't break that afternoon. They simmered. In finance circles, word travels quietly first through phone calls, assistant whispers, legal updates marked confidential. By evening, 3 investment partners had requested clarification from my father's firm. By the next morning, Daniel's family office issued a statement. Brooks Capital prioritizes governance, transparency, and ethical alignment in all strategic partnerships. No names mentioned, but everyone understood. I was in my office when my mother called. Not the polished, controlled voice she used at fundraisers. Her real voice. Emily, she said, softer than I'd heard in years. Can we talk? We are talking. No, she exhaled. I mean really talk. I closed my laptop. What do you want, Mom? Silence lingered. Then, finally, I don't understand when we lost you. The irony almost made me smile. You didn't lose me, I said gently. You just stopped seeing me. She didn't argue. Instead, she asked the question that mattered. Are you really giving most of it away? Yes. Why? Because if I used it to control you, I'd become the very thing Grandpa warned me about. There was a shift in her breathing, like something inside her loosening. Your father hasn't slept, she admitted quietly. I'm not trying to hurt him. But you are changing everything. Yes, I said. That's the point. Later that week, I stood at a podium in a smaller conference room, not a ballroom this time, just a press briefing space inside a Boston nonprofit center. No chandeliers, no designer gowns. Just cameras, reporters, and a clean white backdrop with a new logo. The Carter Equal Opportunity Foundation. I adjusted the microphone. My grandfather believed that wealth reveals character, I began. This foundation is built on the idea that dignity should never depend on income, job title, or social status. Cameras clicked. We are committing $200 million to fund public education infrastructure, workforce housing for educators, and startup grants for community-based initiatives. A reporter raised her hand. Miss Carter, does this decision relate to internal family conflict? I didn't flinch. It relates to values, I answered calmly. Are your parents beneficiaries of the trust? They remain beneficiaries under compliance review. Participation requires adherence to the conduct clause. Meaning? Meaning no one is entitled to dignity at someone else's expense. The clip ran on financial news that night. Not scandal. Not chaos. Reform. Back in Manhattan, the effects unfolded quietly. Olivia's engagement announcement disappeared from her social media. Daniel's name was removed from her bio. My father's firm released a strategic restructuring memo. My mother canceled 2 charity galas. But something else happened too. 3 days after the press conference, my parents showed up again. Not pounding this time. Knocking. When I opened the door, they looked different. Not smaller. Just human. We want to participate, my father said. In what way? In the foundation, he clarified. If that's allowed. It is, I said evenly. With conditions. My mother nodded quickly. Anything. Family therapy, I said. Mandatory. They exchanged a glance. Public acknowledgement of misjudgment, I added. No defensive statements. My father hesitated. This could damage the firm. It already was, I said calmly. Transparency repairs faster than denial. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Olivia didn't come with them that day. She called instead. I got an offer, she said abruptly. A nonprofit in Chicago. Entry-level program director. That's good, I said. It pays less than your job, she added quietly. I know. Silence stretched between us. Do you think I deserve this? She asked. I chose my words carefully. I think you deserve the opportunity to grow. She exhaled slowly. I didn't realize how much I measured everything by comparison, she admitted. Image, appearances. I know, I said softly. Are we okay? We're not there yet, I replied honestly. But we're not enemies. That seemed to settle something. Weeks passed. Therapy sessions began awkward at first, then uncomfortable, then necessary. My father admitted he had equated success with visibility. My mother admitted she feared being judged by other women in her social circle. Olivia admitted she had always felt like she was performing, not living. And me? I admitted I had waited too long to speak up. Not because I lacked power, but because I wanted proof. Grandpa once told me that justice without cruelty is the highest form of strength. I finally understood what he meant. 6 months later, the foundation funded its first housing development for public school teachers in Boston. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest. No champagne towers. No orchestras. Just a line of educators holding keys. One of them hugged me and said, "You didn't have to do this." I smiled. I know. Across the small courtyard, my parents stood quietly beside Olivia, not in the spotlight. Not directing anything, just present. And for the first time in my life, no one was measuring anyone else's worth. Not by income, not by image, not by narrative. The inheritance hadn't divided us, it had revealed us. And sometimes revelation is the only way repair begins. The world didn't explode, it adjusted. That surprised me the most. For years, my family had operated as if reputation was oxygen fragile, scarce, constantly at risk. But once the story shifted from scandal to reform, something unexpected happened. People respected it. Not everyone. Some investors quietly withdrew from my father's firm. A few long-standing partnerships dissolved with carefully worded statements about strategic realignment, but others leaned in. One senior partner told my father during a private call, "Owning mistakes publicly is rare. It signals long-term stability." Stability. The same word Daniel had used when he paused the engagement, now it meant something different. Olivia moved to Chicago that summer. The first time she called from her small apartment near Lincoln Park, she sounded unsure. It's not glamorous, she admitted. My desk faces a wall, and the coffee machine barely works. I smiled. Welcome to nonprofit life. She huffed a small laugh. My team doesn't care about my last name. They care about deadlines. That's healthy. There was a pause. I had to introduce myself without listing accomplishments, she said quietly. Just my name. How did that feel? Terrifying. I understood that. For years, her identity had been wrapped in projection. The perfect daughter, the strategic mind, the social connector. Now, she was just Olivia. And, strangely, that was more powerful than any diamond bracelet. Back in Manhattan, my parents were navigating their own transformation. Therapy was uncomfortable for them. Dr. Myers didn't allow polished narratives. She asked questions like, when did you first associate love with achievement? Why does status feel like safety? Watching my father struggle to answer those questions was surreal. He had always been the one with solutions. Now he was searching. One evening after a session, he walked me to my car. I thought I was protecting the family, he admitted quietly. From what? I asked. From irrelevance. I looked at him carefully. You confused relevance with visibility, I said gently. He nodded. I'm learning that. My mother changed in subtler ways. She stopped hosting image-driven events. She started volunteering at the Foundation's housing initiative not as a donor, but as a coordinator. The first time she assembled welcome kits for new residents, she cried. I never asked where teachers lived, she told me later. I just assumed they were fine. Assumptions. They had shaped so much of our conflict. Meanwhile, the Foundation expanded faster than we anticipated. The Carter Equal Opportunity Foundation funded 3 educator housing complexes, a nationwide teacher supply grant, startup capital for 47 community education programs, and every quarter, I refused to move into a penthouse. I stayed in my modest apartment, not to prove a point, but because I liked it. Because comfort doesn't need spectacle. Daniel and I met for coffee once during that first year, not as potential in-laws, just as 2 people reflecting on a chaotic season. You handled power better than most executives I know, he said. I didn't feel powerful, I admitted. I felt responsible. That's why you were the right choice. His tone wasn't romantic, it was respectful, and that felt healthier. We parted as allies, not almost family. The media eventually moved on. There was a brief article titled, From Family Rift to Foundation Reform. It focused less on the conflict and more on the structure, how morality clauses in family trusts can enforce governance standards. That pleased me, because this was never about drama. It was about accountability. A year after the party, the night I was told it wasn't my place, we gathered again. Same hotel. Smaller event. No orchestras. No investors evaluating optics. Just a quiet dinner celebrating the Foundation's first-year impact report. My mother raised her glass. To growth, she said softly. Olivia flew in from Chicago and spoke about her nonprofit work not as redemption theater, but as progress. My father talked about restructuring his firm to include ethical compliance reviews tied to community investment. And when it was my turn to speak, I didn't mention the past. I simply said, respect doesn't come from position, it comes from practice. The room was quiet, not tense, just reflective. Later that night, as I walked through the lobby alone, I passed the same mirrored column where my mother had told me I didn't belong. I caught my reflection again. Same black dress, same steady posture, but I felt different. Not vindicated, not triumphant, just whole. The inheritance hadn't elevated me, it had clarified me, and that clarity changed everything. A year ago, I walked out of a ballroom believing I had just been erased. Today, I stand in classrooms filled with laughter, construction paper, and the low hum of possibility, and I know something far more powerful. You can't erase someone who knows their worth. The Carter Equal Opportunity Foundation surpassed every projection in its first year. We funded over 1,200 classroom improvement grants. We converted 2 underutilized commercial buildings into affordable housing for educators. We launched a leadership incubator for nonprofit founders from underserved communities. But the most meaningful moments were never the headlines. They were small. A third-grade teacher in Boston who sent me a handwritten note. For the first time in 10 years, I don't have to choose between rent and supplies. A school principal in Detroit who said, "You didn't just fund us, you validated us." Validation. That word used to mean something different in my family. It used to mean approval from the right people. Now, it means alignment with the right values. My parents are still in therapy. Not because they're broken, but because growth isn't a one-time event. It's maintenance. My father's firm now requires social impact disclosures for every major partnership. My mother chairs the foundation's Educator Housing Committee. Olivia stayed in Chicago. She turned down a corporate offer last spring, one that would have doubled her salary because she didn't want to return to performance living, as she calls it. Last month, she visited me. We walked through one of the housing complexes we funded together. A young teacher recognized her from the foundation website and thanked her. Olivia looked stunned. Afterward, she turned to me and said quietly, "I used to think admiration was the goal, but gratitude feels different. It lasts longer," I replied. She nodded, and that was enough. As for me, I still live in the same apartment. The chipped blue mug is still in my cabinet. The trust remains intact, governed by policy and transparency. The wealth hasn't disappeared. It has direction. Sometimes people ask if I regret not keeping more for myself. I always answer the same way. I kept the part that mattered, because what mattered wasn't the number. It was the lesson. Money doesn't create character. It reveals it. Power doesn't demand respect. It tests it. And dignity isn't inherited through bloodlines or balance sheets. It's practiced in how you speak, how you include, how you respond when someone says, "This isn't your place." If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need to announce your worth. You don't need to perform it. You don't need to compete for it. You simply live it consistently, quietly until the world adjusts. The night my parents banned me from the family party, they believed I had nothing. They were wrong. I had clarity. And clarity is stronger than inheritance. So if you ever find yourself standing in a room where someone implies you don't belong, stand tall. Not because you control millions, but because you control who you become, and that is worth more than any fortune.